Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Sharon Bown, and joining us this evening from the Australian Army is Corporal Lucy Galbally. Today, we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the beginning of the Kokoda Trial campaign. By July 1942, the Japanese had swept all before them in a seemingly unstoppable advance through Southeast Asia and into the Pacific. This series of victories brought Japanese forces into Australian territory in New Guinea and within a few miles of the Australian mainland. The bombing of Darwin in February, in particular, heightened fears that an invasion was imminent. For any attack south towards Australia, the Japanese needed Port Moresby. Similarly, any Allied attack north through New Guinea required Port Moresby as a base. After failing to take Port Moresby by sea, the Japanese landed at Gona on the northern coast of Papua. On this day, 80 years ago. They quickly began their advance overland across the Owen-Stanley Range. Raw, inexperienced Australian militiamen of the 39th Battalion and Papuan soldiers from the Papuan Infantry Battalion were the first to encounter the Japanese at Awala. They were forced to withdraw to Kokoda, the village that lent its name to the campaign, which became the scene of intense action when the Japanese attacked on the 29th of July. Over the next 2 weeks, the Australians lost, recaptured, and lost again the village in a series of intense close-quarter battles with no quarter shown. They fell back to Dunedin and beyond. Shortly, we will hear the story of one man of the 39th Battalion who fell during this state of the campaign. Forced back along the Kokoda Trail, the Australians fought several more tenacious rearguard actions. On the 29th of August, after 4 days of fighting, the Japanese broke through the Australian defences at Ishurava. Further battles took place as the Australians continued their fighting withdrawal towards Port Moresby. The Australians finally dug in on Imata Ridge, less than 50 kilometres from Port Moresby, when the Japanese advance was finally halted. With mounting casualties and supply lines stretched to breaking point, the Japanese began their withdrawal on the 24th of September. The roles were now reversed, and Australians began their pursuit of the Japanese, as the Japanese fought delaying actions over the same ground which had already been fought over so bitterly. When Kokoda village was finally liberated on the 2nd of November, the fighting was not over. Fighting around Ovai and Garari would bring the Australians to Kamusi River, and for the exhausted Australians, the battles to capture the beachheads of Boona, Gona and Sanananda were still ahead. Over 600 Australian lives had been lost. Over 1,000 men had been wounded, and up to 3 times that number were evacuated due to illness. We should also take a moment to remember our Papuan allies who shared in the terrible conditions, carrying supplies and ammunition up the rugged trail, returning carrying the sick and wounded. Victory would not have been possible without the tireless service of the Papuan carriers. Today we remember all those who died in the Kokoda Trail campaign and whose names are recorded here on the Roll of Honour, and the survivors who returned home. This evening, we are honoured to welcome Second World War veteran Mr. Les Cook. Les enlisted with his father Ernest into the army in 1940. To be able to enlist, both lied about their ages. His father put his age down by 4 years, and Les put his up by 4. Les was in fact just 17 years of age on enlistment. Les served with the 2nd 14th Battalion in North Africa, Greece, Crete, Syria, and in the Pacific, including Kokoda. He also served as part of the British Commonwealth Occupation Force in Japan. Les, we thank you for your service and for joining us this evening. We are also honoured to acknowledge Commandant of the Royal Military College Duntroon, Brigadier Anna Duncan, and the accompanying delegation, which includes officer cadets representing Kokoda Company. Kokoda Company is named in honour of the Kokoda campaign fought in New Guinea during the Second World War. We also warmly welcome Mr. John King, President of the Returned and Service Leagues of Australia ACT branch. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and New South Wales school students on behalf of St Joseph's Catholic Primary School, Gilgandra and Jarvis Bay School. If you are able, would you please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Those requiring a seat, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations, for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Lance Corporal Dennis Hackett. Dennis Hackett was born on the 17th of May, 1915, in the Melbourne suburb of Narre Warren, the son of Arthur and Ellen Hackett. By the time of the Second World War, Hackett was living with his parents in Getho, a small Victorian town in South Gippsland, where he worked as a cheesemaker. In March 1941, 26-year-old Dennis Hackett enlisted in the militia and joined the 52nd Battalion, consisted of men recruited between Caulfield, Dandenong and Gippsland. In this early part of his service, Hackett and his battalion remained in Australia, undertaking garrison duties. In October, Hackett transferred to the newly raised 39th Battalion. The battalion had been raised that month to relieve the Queensland-based 49th Battalion, which was serving as the garrison force around Port Moresby. Battalion headquarters was open near Bacchus Marsh, and on the 10th of October, the first draft of 9 officers and about 500 men, including Hackett, assembled at Caulfield Racecourse Transit Camp and were transported by rail to Darley Camp. On the 21st of November, after parading through the streets of Melbourne, the battalion was declared ready for training. On the 7th and 8th of December, the Japanese attacked the US fleet at Pearl Harbor and the British in Malaya. 2 days later, the battalion was ordered to prepare to move as it was mobilised for war service. The battalion's training was cut short. It had only been able to undertake one training exercise, known as the Battle of Karangamite. With the threat of invasion by the Japanese, the 39th Battalion joined the 49th and 53rd Battalions to form the 30th Brigade, and plans were made for the formation to deploy to New Guinea. Christmas Day 1941 was spent in camp before the men were loaded onto 2 trains for a rapid move north. During this period, Hackett was found absent without leave and was confined to barracks for 8 days as punishment. Regardless, he arrived with his comrades in Sydney on the 27th of December 1941, and they made their way to Woolloomooloo Wharf, where they boarded the passenger ship Aquitania, bound for New Guinea. Hackett and his comrades arrived in Moresby in early January 1942, after little military training. In March, Hackett again fell foul of military discipline, charged with disobeying a lawful command and fined as punishment. This did not prevent his promotion to Lance Corporal in April, however. Until this point, Lance Corporal Hackett and his comrades had mostly been involved in garrison duties and working parties. In June, they were ordered to proceed up the Kokoda Trial to block any Japanese overland advance. Bravo Company and troops from the Papuan Infantry Battalion reached Kokoda on the 15th of July. Japanese forces landed at Gona on the north coast of Papua a week later and quickly moved inland. Around this time, Hackett enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force, remaining with his unit, but now freed to serve outside Australia and its territories. The first clash with Japanese troops occurred at Awala on the 23rd of July, after which the Australians fell back to Kokoda. Towards the end of July, the Japanese attacked Kokoda, and the Australians were forced to withdraw to Daniki. On the 8th of August, the 39th Battalion launched a counterattack. Outnumbered and short of ammunition, the men fell back to Naniki after 2 days of fighting. The Australians eventually managed to repel the ongoing Japanese attack, falling back to Isarava on the 14th of August. However, they were not joined by Lance Corporal Dennis Hackett, who had been killed in action the day before. Today he is commemorated at the Port Moresby Memorial. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left amongst 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. The photograph displayed beside the pool of reflection shows Lance Corporal Dennis Hackett's name listed on the Port Moresby Memorial. This is one, but many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lance Corporal Dennis Hackett, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them. Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.